and not relying on women is the way to go, or do you feel like, what is it exactly?
Do you want to try and elaborate on that further?
Right, because once again I was looking at forums and stuff, because they don't have actual written works, except for what I've read from Rollo Tomasi, the Rational Male and stuff. But he's not MGTOW, but he does elaborate their positions and stuff. But what I'm saying is that when I was the Sandman and others, it seemed to me like the highest level of MGTOW is a man who isolates himself from women. He does not connect with them. He lives for example, one of the prescriptions was like, have a woman that you pay for her services or something like that, so you don't have to be harmed by, for example, this is a big thing, it's a big theme, it's a massive theme, and I think rightfully so. Like for example, in the Western world we have like men being stripped away from the right to see their children in particular situations. So in order to avoid that scenario, you should completely separate yourself from women. To what extent do you agree with such proposition? To the extent, in fact, to be fair to him, he says that except for if you want sexual services or something like that, maybe you can get an escort or go to Thailand or something like that. I don't know exactly what his prescription was, but he was trying to, make a man less reliant on a woman's actions as much as possible. That's my understanding of MGTOW.
Okay.
What do you think of? Is my understanding correct? To what extent, if it is, to what extent do you agree with that?
I think it's kind of, because MGTOW's kind of a movement that a lot of other guys have mixed opinions on, and I think it's gone as far to the point where it's like guys just have their own opinion of what MGTOW is, while cutting off what other guys think MGTOW is.
Let me ask you a question. What are your main concerns? So you mentioned one of them, that you feel like there's been this narrative. In the red pill community, they call it the gynocentric order. So there's this narrative of like women have not been given their rights or whatever, and you feel like that narrative is false, and that in fact your own grievances have been suppressed. Is this correct characterization? All right. So what kind of grievances do you have then?
Well, just kind of like, men are much more likely to face violent and hate crimes. Men are much more likely to be homeless. Men have a shorter life expectancy. I guess men also have less, I could be wrong here, but men have less sex than women do. I mean, that's controversial, but...
No, I mean, there was a less sex is a bit of an interesting thing. There was a study done by Superdrug. Superdrug actually put forward a study, right, to see how many sexual partners a man or woman have. Both of them are around 9 sexual partners, I think by the age of 21 or something like that. You'd be surprised. In terms of, because that's variety of partnership. But then the question is of, maybe a woman will be in more a long-term relationship, so she's having more sex. That's a question I haven't looked into, so I'm going to go and look into it.
Okay.
But the point is that I understand your grievances. Okay. As a Muslim, we believe in a complementarian system. Okay. So we believe in a system of like checks and balances. We don't believe that men and women are equal, or that equality of value means identicality of roles. Okay. We believe that we're equal on a value perspective, like as intrinsic human beings. I have the same value as a woman, or if a woman has the same value as me. There's not ceteris paribus, right? There's no reason for that not to be the case. However, there are certain distinctive features that men have that women don't have, and vice versa. And as such, they're tailored laws. Like, for example, one of the most controversial ones, I'll give you 2 or 3 most controversial ones, you might have heard of already, in the Islamic paradigm, is that a man is a qawwam, which is that he has a managerial hierarchy in a house. Now, a woman, on the other hand, as a mother, is more influential as a mother. It's more influential as a mother. So in other words, there's a check and balance going on here. Okay? There's checks and balances going on. And so one could argue that, well, in order to avoid this hierarchy, I won't get married. Or that this hierarchy, if it's checked and balanced, if children are into the equation, then I ought not to get into a marriage, because there's the hierarchy there. So, for example, a woman without a child will not have the checks and balances. But the point is, for us, the idea is not to try and create equality. Equality of outcomes, even equality of outcomes, we don't say is a favorable. It's not a favorable thing. It's not a good life. It could be that equality of outcomes can produce negative net results. So the point is, for us, is that we believe in checks and balances. There are certain things that men and women have. Men have it, women don't have it, and vice versa. which creates a harmony. It calibrates the system, okay? So yes, a man will have a final say in major decision making in the Islamic religion. A man can marry 4 women at the same time, whereas a woman can only marry one.
The thing is, though, I don't think we've ever lived in a society where men and women have actually been equal before, but we've lived through like centuries of men and women not being equal. So it's kind of like we haven't actually fully officially tried it out of what life would be like if men and women were.
Yeah, and the point would be like you can't try it out. If you did, I think you'd have an inefficiency. Because here's, like, for example, let's take the Ukraine example, right? Now women are being evacuated or whatever. Women and children are being evacuated, but men have to fight. Right. So there is the feminist call for equality is non-applicable to that context because they realize the inefficiency of putting women on the front line. In this country, for example, the UK, women were not even allowed on the front line. I think until fairly recently, because it's inefficient to have weaker people on the front line.
Yeah.
And so, my argument is this: is that I feel like the MGTOW prescriptions are a step too far. And I'll be honest with you, bro. I think they force or they encourage men to be cowardly. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because in reality, there are these problems in life. That there's always going to be some level of tension between men and women. But I'm talking about the prescription, which you haven't agreed with anyway, which is the idea that we should be separating ourselves, which is similar to the radical feminist prescription. Separating ourselves from the bulk of the other sex. I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is that we should re-establish a relationship with women, but with new terms. The terms are these: that there are going to be some rights I have as a man that you as a woman are not going to have, and vice versa. There are going to be some things I get that you're not going to get, and that is based on the fact that we are physiologically and biologically and anatomically different. That's based on the fact that that will bring forth the most efficient outcomes. So, for example, the Islamic prescription of a woman to breastfeed for 2 years. A man can't do that physically. Yeah. Even to the point where Ngozi, who wrote a book called A Feminist Manifesto, she was saying everything should be exactly the same, equal, whatever, except for breastfeeding, because she realizes a biological impossibility here. But we're saying, why does it stop there? If you having breast milk is something which is advantageous, why not also realize that a mother being in the child for X amount of years is also advantageous to the child? Right. Why not also realize that according to all the studies that we have, for example, Farron's book, The Myth of Male Power, I'm not sure if you've read it.
No, I haven't.
This is a very important book, you should read it, yeah? Okay. And The Boy Crisis. Farron's books are important, yeah? In the men's right world, or the backlash literature world, yeah? Where he talks about the advantage of a nuclear family, okay? So when I was talking to particularly, it was a person called Nicholas Wolfinger, and he does demographic studies on marriages and stuff like that, yeah? And he unequivocally told me this, and it's online, that in fact, a nuclear family, which is religious in particular, where there's frequent religious practice, is most efficient in terms of outcomes, in terms of like a child's more likely to have a higher education, more likely to be, less likely to be involved in delinquentism and criminality and so on. Right. So we know what the structure is which caused the best outcome. And if men and women, instead of this kind of like, I would say, partisan, kind of discussion, we focus on children. Okay, what is in the best outcome or the best thing of the children, the next generation? I think if we both come to that conclusion and we re-establish the terms of engagement based on these principles which are most efficient, then I feel like there's going to be a positive outcome here. How does that sound to you? Is that reasonable?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Right, think about it. But what I would say is, look, let me tell you something, okay? I personally believe in the following. Yeah. I personally believe that human beings are fundamentally, psychologically egoistic. Yeah. That not ethically, but psychologically, fundamentally, we care about ourselves. There's a narcissism in all of us. Yeah. Fundamentally, if I got my leg cut off, you would care less about that than if your own leg were cut off, or even if your own mum's leg were cut, whatever. Yeah, I think so. We are fundamentally wired that way. There is a deep, entrenched psychological egoism. Yeah.
That's because that's not us. It's just like we haven't tasted the pain.
Yeah, exactly. So fundamentally, things go down to two things. what's in my best interest, what's going to remove my pain, what's going to increase my pleasure. A lot of it is like that. Yeah. Now, that's a psychological condition. However, now, there's only one way to actually transcend this. Because in reality, to get the best outcomes, we must transcend that. Because if it's ethical egoism, it produces a conflict of interest. And a conflict of interest is always against your own interest, which is ironic. So being egoistic, being also about my rights, yeah, if it's a man doing it, whether it's gender egoism from a man's side to a woman or females to females or vice versa, is always going to create negative results, okay? Because there's going to be conflicts of interest that cannot be resolved, which are going to end up being against that person themselves, yeah? So the way to do this is to have a transcendental idea, something which goes above and beyond the call of gender egoism. And we say that for as Muslims, we say that that idea is God, basically. That we have to ask a more fundamental question: what is the purpose of life? And the purpose of life for us is that we worship God, that we submit to God, and so on. You see? Because when you have a meaning in life, as Nietzsche said, if you have a why, almost any how is possible. Like, what really will motivate a woman or a man? Well, let me ask you two questions. What is most likely to motivate a man to extract from his own resources so that he can upkeep his family, his children, rear his kids and whatever, even though that's against his economic interest? Likewise, what is most likely to make a woman obedient to a husband? Obedient to him, it's a very strong word in this managerial hierarchy. Accepting of these things, that even if it causes some level of insecurity or discomfort. I would say it has to be something which goes above and beyond the core of, okay, I'm doing this for myself, it's in my best interest. It has to be, yes, it is in your best interest, but there's a transcendental idea which is what? Which is a godly one. This is a metaphysic, you know, and it gives the whole gender discussion meaning. Which is why, I'll be honest with you, despite the fact that we also suffer from gender egoists from both sides in the Muslim world, Muslim feminists or those who are influenced by them, and men that are too gender egoistic on their side as well, I feel like of all the religions in the world, maybe with the exception of Judaism as well, Islam and Orthodox Judaism has been able to keep the idea and the sacredity of the nuclear family intact. And there's a reason for that. And even Tomasi actually agrees with that. He mentions that in his book, to be fair to him, yeah? And so what I'm saying is, the way forward, what I'm gonna say is you're less likely to convince, extract his resources and sacrifice his life, or a woman to obey a man, if there isn't an overarching idea, which is that you're doing it for the sake of God, as part of your purpose of life and so on. That has consistently been shown to be the case. So I think there's a major disadvantage in trying to implement the most efficient types of family restructuring on a secular paradigm. I think that the religious paradigm is infinitely more powerful in being able to do so. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes.
I mean, I think one thing I have realised is that I guess it kind of speaks out to kind of the rest of the world, where it's kind of like, I think the most secularized people, I think, are often the ones that have kind of faced religion at the most extreme level, and that's why, to the point that it kind of harms them mentally, so that's why they end up going secular.
I understand, but all the evidence about religion and human contentment is against the thesis that you just mentioned. For example, Pew Research have done a study on human happiness.
Yeah.
And they said that the people that are most religious are actually the most happy.
Right, yeah.
There is a research on that. Yes, and Pew Research is seen as like the gold standard. Pardon?
What about like Sweden?
2019.
What about in Sweden, where they say like religion is like dropping quite rapidly, but general society is like really quite happy?
No, general society is not happy in Sweden. I feel like Sweden, first of all, has the highest level of suicide in the world, especially male suicide, which we were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, quite be honest. I'm saying, like, put the sociological studies to the side. Go to Sweden. I'm saying go to Sweden, and then go to any place you like in Africa. Any place you like. Any place you like in the whole of the Middle East. Just look at the people's faces.
I feel like there's like...
No, I'm being serious. Sorry, I know this sounds like a superficial remark. If you go to, I've been to Sweden many times. I've been to Norway many times, yeah? When you go to Scandinavia, I go to Scandinavia. I'm saying that, yes, the studies have shown, like for example, Forbes magazine have said this, the World Health Organization have said this, the highest level of depression are in countries like Sweden, yeah? And the United States of America. So the studies are there, but I'm just saying, from a human, if you've traveled, you go to Sweden, you go to Norway, Look at the people. Just look at the people. Look how they interact with each other. Look at how they look in the streets. Look at their disposition and their temperament. Then go to, I'm from Alexandria in Egypt, yeah? Originally, that's where I'm from, yeah? Go to Alexandria. People are a bit complaining about the economic situation, yeah? But they're not like the people in Sweden. I promise you that.
I went to Norway.
And what do you think?
I thought they were brilliant. I looked around.
They're brilliant. I'm not saying they're not brilliant, but they're not happy. I'm saying that happiness is people confuse the Human Development Index, which is it's an economic it's an economic thing, yeah, with human happiness. That's the first thing. The second thing is
a metric that measures quality of life within societal frameworks like that.
That is that. It's called the Human Development Index.
Oh, okay. Well, I must have been looking at another one because there's a few different.
The Human Development Index, it puts together life expectancy, GDP per capita, and educational levels and a few other things.
I feel like there are like a lot of countries have their own version of what freedom is. So like, I guess Sweden views it as like very liberal, but then there's another type of freedom in America, where it's kind of like their freedom where like people are really crazy. But then
I get you.
And then there's also Japan,
but America's comparatively to Sweden, a very religious country, especially the Bible Belt. There's a lot of religion going on there. What I'm saying is that the issue is this. First and foremost, I feel like there's a hidden presupposition. In my view, the purpose of life is not actually to be happy. And in fact, it's not actually to be happy. And in fact, I think physiologically or psychologically, being happy all the time is not actually a good state to be in. Because if you think about it, even from a biological perspective, yeah, imagine when you're happy, your dopamine goes up, right? Or serotonin or neurotransmitters go up. But the more euphoric you are, the more you crash, in fact. So being at a physiological, psychological state of euphoria or happiness or ecstasy all the time is not actually. So the Quran actually tells us from our perspective, the best state to be in as a stable is not happiness, but is in fact tranquility. That's why the Quran states, for example, right? الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُم بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. I will translate. أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. So basically it says that the ones who believe and their hearts find tranquility in the remembrance of God, that surely with the remembrance of God do hearts find tranquility. So in other words, the best static state to have from an Islamic perspective or from a human perspective, or at least what the prescription of the Quran is one of tranquility. If you have peaks of, for example, ecstasy or euphoria, that's okay. But if it's too often, it will crash you. You will not be in a positive mind frame, you see? So for us, we don't believe that happiness is where you should be going anyway. Tranquility is where you should be.
Would you say there's a difference between being happy and doing something right? Is what you're trying to say.
What I'm saying is that being happy is not always a good thing to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's okay not to be happy. So long as you're tranquil. The best life, if you were to tell me, look, for the next 2 months, what state do you want to be in? I will say I want to be in a tranquil state. If I say I want to be in a euphoric state, then I know for a fact, and any drug user will know this, including yourself. Yeah? I'm not gonna.
Okay.
I know him from before. Any drug user will know this, that when you take drugs, if you take opioids, which I did take, but as a prescription drug, when I had an injury, I had to take heavy loads of opioids, which is like tramadol and morphines and stuff like that. And it gives you a bit of a kick. But then what you realize is that it gives you a major crash as well. As Van der Kolk, he wrote a book called The Body Keeps Score. Just know that if you're feeling ecstatic at any moment, that there's going to come a time where that is going to be repaid in either depression or sadness or low mood. So for me, the best, being ecstatic once in a while, twice, 3 times is okay. But being ecstatic all the time ain't what I want to be anyway. I don't want to be happy all the time. I want to be tranquil all the time. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So what I'm saying is, the question now is, if the physiological or psychological state of human being, which is optimal, is a tranquil one, yeah, how does one attain that? So the Quranic message is saying that the way to attain that is through remembrance of God. So let me explain how. Let me explain how. Let me explain. The Quran states the following. Yeah, the Quran honestly says, "Inna al-insana khuliqa halu'a." That certainly the human being is being created in a state of anxiety. That the human being is fundamentally anxious. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. If evil befalls him, then he's in a panicked state. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And if good comes to him, then he's very preventative. So the original physiological or psychological state of the human being is one of anxiety, of panic, and of stinginess. And then it says إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, except for those who are الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ, the ones who are consistent upon their prayers. And then it gives like 8 different characteristics. What are these characteristics? All of these characteristics relate to a metaphysical meaning, something bigger than the human beings themselves. As I said, as Nietzsche said, if you have a why, almost any how is possible. Yeah? If you have a meaning of life and a purpose of life, then you can get through pain. Like for example, you look like you're going to the gym or do some stuff, yeah? You don't look like that. No, I'm joking. okay, I'm only kidding. But when you go to the gym, if like, let me put it into a human example, yeah? If someone goes to the gym and does like bench press and all these kind of things, right? Really and truly, effectively, they're causing micro tears in their muscle, right? But in so doing, in their mind, they're doing it for a purpose which is bigger than that, which is what? So that they can grow their muscles and whatever, right? Are you with me? All right, so something which would effectively be painful in one sense has been transformed to something which is, in any event, enjoyable maybe, which is worthwhile or something like that. Why? It's been transformed like that because of perception. So perception and teleos, or purpose or meaning, transforms a fundamentally painful thing into something which is fundamentally bearable or fundamentally even enjoyable. You see what I'm saying?
I do see.
Yeah, and that's why there was a guy that wrote, his name was Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book called The Meaning of Life, or Meanings of Life. He was a Holocaust victim, yeah, but he was a survivor, and he invented something called Search for the Meaning of Life. He invented something called logotherapy, because he basically said this: that what differentiated the victims of the Holocaust that could bear the pain and punishment from those who couldn't is the fact that they were praying and that they were creating meaning out of it and narrative out of it and whatever. So logotherapy is actually, he differentiates it because he says, and he quotes Nietzsche as well, this quote that I said, he differentiates it by saying that if you create meaning and purpose, yeah, in someone's life, then it's one of the most therapeutically effective methods. Going back to religion, and he specifically even says religion is one of the best ways of doing that. So going back to what I'm saying now, yeah? Yeah. So there is psychological backing, yeah, for what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you create meaning in situations which would otherwise be negative, okay, or would induce a pessimistic reaction for a human being, then that is it's a surefire way of alleviating that pain or even reconceptualizing or reformulating in one's mind. That's why there's a hadith of the Prophet, Prophet Muhammad. He said something. He says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. He said, wondrous is the affair of the believer. إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. That all of his affair is good. وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. And this ain't the case for anyone except for a believer. إِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ سَرَّاء شَكَرَ. If good things happen to him, he's thankful. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاء صَبَرَ وَشَكَرَ. And if bad things happen to him, he's patient and thankful. Meaning what? Meaning that you can never really attain this high level of meaning unless you have a metaphysic, a religious metaphysic, which will allow you to think of the bigger picture. There's nothing material here. Like, I'll be honest with you, when people die for their country, or die for the Queen, or die for whomever, yeah? I'll be honest, I feel like that is, for me, it's not a compelling enough reason to fight or die. Because why should I die for another human being, whomever they are? Why should I die for another human being, whomever they are? Yeah? Unless it's maybe you can argue a child.